for all. Thank you all. Would you please call the roll?
Mr. Erickson.
Here.
Mr. Craig.
Here.
Mr. Byrd.
Here.
Mr. Mallinger.
Here.
Ms. Duffy. Here. Ms. Burke. Here. Mr. Bogowski.
Present.
Hey, thanks to all the board for attending, thanks to the staff for attending, and thanks to Jennifer for being our public very much. All right, consideration of minutes for September 17th, you all should have copies, and entertain a motion to accept them as written.
So moved.
I'll second.
Anyone have any comments, corrections? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, anything, Jennifer, audience participation? Okay. No final approvals, no site plans, no preliminaries, no public hearing, no findings of fact. Our sole business tonight is to see if we can get the framework for port ordinances for rental and accessory dwelling units across a finish line, or at least very close to it. Just to remind everybody the context, this isn't law. This is just a document to guide the creation of an ordinance. Ultimately, it is up to the council to do what they want to do, both with the framework and with the ordinance. The expected plan is when we finish this, Mike has already been working on the ordinance to implement these. Once this is done, then he will continue and finish doing an ordinance, which we will then see later. The council has asked us to take a look at that, make recommendations, even though some of it might be a little bit beyond the normal charter of what the plan commission is, but at least to offer an opinion on it and bring something to the council. So our job now is to see if we can get this wrapped up tonight. So what we have in front of us that Tammy distributed was the marked up copy based on the second of two meetings that we had. In blue and in green, it shows the changes that we have done then. So what I would propose we want to do tonight is I will first open to the commission any questions that they've got about it. If it doesn't think it reflects what we did last time, let's get that out of the way. And secondly, and perhaps what I think may be more substantive, Jim Mandan is here, and we wanted to get the town's consultant take on some advice on some of these, some of the issues that it raises, and see if that triggers any discussion to revisit any parts of that. At the end, conclude, so we can decide to hear that, we can decide to make some changes to it, we can decide to pass over it, and we'll have the opportunity to visit every one of these issues again when we see what actually comes out of the ordinance. And remember, Mike signaled, and Chris has also talked about the fact that at the ultimate, when the ordinance is written, it will intentionally be written by the town so that it will stand muster as compared to what we actually can do. Therefore, what we say in here is a guidance. What we get in the ordinance might vary a bit from what we see here. So be it. That's the way it is. We want to get this done. Okay, so first from the commission, does anybody have any questions about the document? With regard to, does it not represent the result of discussions we've had at the last two meetings?
I have 2 points I wanted to address, 2 different sections or sentences, if this is the time. I believe it is page 2, under general requirements for residents, the bottom page. The last bullet point, bedrooms and basements or attics are prohibited unless approved egress is available. Can we have any bedroom? And not just have it to attics and basements?
Seems straightforward. Consensus? Okay.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, I know. Jay's talking about the same thing I was talking to you about, Rob.
so adding the word, we'll say, add the word all,
Yeah,
and then strike
in a basement or attic.
Yeah.
in a basement or attic. Number 1. Thank you, Jay. Next.
The next one, 1, 2, 3, I believe it's page 4 under short-term rentals. The second bullet down that's not striked out, I guess, about parking spots. Just a question, with mandatoring in parking spots and not on the street, if this would affect, like, if a house in town has an Airbnb and there is no parking but on the street?
Yeah,
Some residents have no choice but to park on the street, as much as we all probably hate it when we try to drive through town, but that's the only option.
No, Jay, I was thinking when they talk about giving the maximum occupancy, like you're supposed to have stated that, I thought that they could also put maximum vehicles as well. Because I know the places that I rent are always like, hey, by the way, how many vehicles are you bringing?
I'm okay with them, with that side of things, with maximum.
yeah,
We ask them to put a max vehicle, but it's just that it's saying that you can't park on the street. And that's just where I'm coming from, you know, I lived in downtown my entire life and we had no choice but to park on the street, so if I turned my house into a Airbnb, I couldn't because it says I can't park on the street.
yeah,
Guests can't park on the street. Well, that's the only option.
yeah, it's a problem.
Well, does town approved deal with that? So if it just says town approved parking, because no matter what, they're gonna apply, right? They're gonna register, they're gonna have to demonstrate to you where parking is, and if they demonstrate it's on their property, that's okay. If they demonstrate they have street parking, that'll also be approved, right, when they apply. So maybe it should say town approved parking.
That would seem to resolve it on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis then. So then it would read, residents must only park on town-approved parking.
Or
We can even
use-
identify it through the permit, on the parking approved through the permit. Cause then that would help eliminate situations like we have in that one Airbnb where they're having the parties. There's a driveway there where you can park 2 or 3 cars in it, but would prevent 20 cars from parking on the street.
But,
We also
but
don't wanna
not,
park
they all,
it in the grass, cause it's illegal to park in the grass. So
it's,
it would, town approve, they'd have to, our parking requirements now is you can't park in the grass, so we're enforcing that right now, because there are a lot of people who just park in the grass. If, it has to be parked on a hard surface in some sort of legal parking space, either street or on the property in the driveway, so that would apply to any rental. But we have, there's places at Porter Beach where
There
there's
is
no
no-
parking for the residents, unless they're in a private parking lot or find somewhere to park. There's no parking, because we don't allow parking on the streets in Porter Beach, so they have to follow town code and find some place to park. Downtown, they can park in the street. I had this come up with, several times with me before, where somebody said, well, they're parking, I had this issue with my house in Toledo, but somebody parks in front of your house, public street, they can park in front of your house. I had somebody call me, probably a month ago, and said, well, my neighbor has 4 cars. Isn't that too many cars? No, we can't restrict how many cars they have.
Right,
In a public street, you could literally park all the way down the street if you wanted to, we can't
Yeah.
restrict that. So they park in the driveway, they park in the street, but you can't tell somebody you can't own 4 cars, you can't
Right.
do that. So,
What if we phrase it, renters must only utilize town-approved parking?
Yeah, I just think that generally covers it, because that's
Yeah.
either by
Yeah,
definition, the code,
yeah,
the permit, and then we just
Yeah.
make sure when that permitting.
I just didn't wanna
we'll ask
eliminate.
that in the permit,
street parking.
where you're parking.
So when that application comes, you can even make sure there's a designation of what the approved parking is for each one.
Yep, that worked.
That's great.
okay. Renters must only use town-approved parking. Good catch. Now, that seems to address part of what you were saying, but maybe I think you were making another point too.
oh, I would thought if you're going to make them state their occupancy, why not ask how many cars are allowed as well? It's pretty standard.
For the rentals,
The
generally.
rentals, yeah. I forgot where you put it. We kind of had a long discussion.
Statement of occupancy on page 3.
And then why don't you just put statement of vehicles as well?
I mean, I don't have any objection.
Well, that's the person applying for the permit
Yeah,
in general, yeah, and they could, what is your plan for parking cars? Yeah,
Okay.
I don't think that's wrong to ask that. It
okay.
goes along with what we just said. what's your thought? Well, I'm gonna just, not gonna park in the neighbor's driveway, so they should have some idea where they're gonna park cars.
Gonna have 50 people and all parked down.
We're just asking them a question, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Right,
Right.
so we'll add that as a bullet in the registration. Information required for the registration will include plan for on-site parking.
Which bullet is
Okay.
there?
Probably under maximum occupancy, I would assume. Is this registration? Yeah.
Registration, yeah.
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 Have another bullet down there, or up here. wherever you want to put it.
Okay, other things from the commission.
I had two things as well.
Sure.
The first thing, I thought, under the registration part, since we're there, the implementation date will be 6 months of passage. We thought that was just an arbitrary number. Like, why did we have to wait 6 months before it's implemented? I wasn't quite sure what that was saying.
Just the time it takes to process all of it, basically, yeah.
So it's not arbitrary, there's
No.
a reason. Okay, never mind. I thought we had agreed that that
Well,
was.
part of that's inspections, so we can only inspect them, it's, so many at a time, so I think that's why we.
Yeah, that's probably ambitious as
Yeah.
it is.
Yes.
Okay,
Right.
okay. And then the second one was right below that. This is when Jay and I were kind of talking about distance versus time from the emergency vehicles. I
Oh, yeah.
asked a question about, well, is it all emergencies? And Jay's like, well, if they had a heart attack, no, that's not something we would even call for. But that's kind of not, that's not how it's written here. So I was hoping, I think the heart of this is when you're talking about emergencies, you're really talking about like non-life-threatening emergencies, right?
Yeah, this is, yeah.
Well,
Chief,
Well,
it all comes together, because you're right, we're not gonna wait to force entry into the building for a heart attack. We're gonna kick the door in, but then we have to wait for somebody to secure the door, because we can't leave their unit unlocked. So that ties up a police officer or a fireman while we're waiting for a maintenance person
Yeah.
or somebody in charge of the property to come secure the building.
Okay, I was thinking more for like disturbances affecting public peace or safety, but I guess it's just really about the tying up your people.
Well, right, everything is a time frame, and we deal with this a lot, especially used to deal with this a lot with one of the apartment complexes, is it would take 15 to 20 minutes even to get a hold of somebody to come. Even if I have a water leak that's leaking on an electrical box, I have no maintenance to shut off water, any of that stuff. So it's not really life-threatening, but it is an emergency. But we also have, if we have to force a door, waiting for somebody because we can't leave their apartment
It's gotta be
unsecured.
secured, yeah.
Even something as stupid as, I think last year it was Christmas Eve night, I was in an apartment waiting, there was a leak upstairs leaking down onto the furnace or something from a tenant, and it's like, now I gotta sit here and wait for somebody to make sure nothing happens while I'm here, and that takes time, so.
Okay,
It's not always just it's good
I
to not
worry a
have.
little bit that kind of discriminates against people that are disabled or maybe have a pacemaker, like maybe I'm less likely to rent to those people because, I don't know. They got health concerns that I probably ain't gonna get a call for. It just is what it is. Okay,
Yeah,
I won't argue with you if that's what you want. I will ask, this seems like a kind of a hammer of one of the many tools that we have in our toolbox. This does seem like a hammer one, because if people are not responding within 30 minutes, there are consequences, and the consequences are that they will get their permit will be withdrawn, and it says at the bottom, when a property is determined to be a nuisance according to the applicable town ordinances, is that a nuisance as well? Like, what's the consequences? So like, when they don't respond,
That would be whatever we draw up in the ordinance for violations of the ordinance.
What I'm working on in the ordinance is there's like first, second, third, whatever, let's call it a complaint or violation. So each violation is gonna have a different answer. The first
progressive,
one might be, you get a letter and a sternly
Okay.
wagged finger, and then it might be, or fines, so they tend to get bigger as you go along, so, after so many violations, you end up with either yanked or have a hearing on getting your permit yanked.
so this is kind of more for
So these
habitual
all plug into
offenders.
that, yeah.
that you kind of, that's the idea, that's the spirit
Yeah.
of it, not just one
So
strike
like,
out.
like if somebody doesn't respond and Jay stand there for 2 hours, that's gonna be a violation,
Okay,
because it's creating a problem for the emergency personnel to stand around. But those things are getting written into the ordinance, so.
Well,
that-
one violation
be in-
does not trigger.
Yeah, you don't
nuisance.
automatically get yanked, there's,
Yeah.
I wanna say 3 or 4, I can't remember the
Yeah.
number, but it's,
okay, so
we'll get to that when we go through the ordinance.
I just wanted to make sure that the habitual offenders are what we're targeting.
Yes, that's the whole
Okay.
point of that, is if
Yeah, and that's in fact
you
why
continue
we've
to get
got,
violations, then we have to have something.
yeah, and that's why we refer to nuisance, because the nuisance has a series of escalations built into it.
And Chief, is there anything that you guys do, I know it'd be extreme, that if you had to call somebody to board it up or do that is there a mechanism in the code to back charge or lien their properties for some, I know that would be.
Well,
extreme.
fortunate part is our resources for boarding up will not charge us. So if we call them in an emergency, they will not charge us. They will then attempt to recoup
So they don't charge you.
from the homeowner, or the landowner or the tenant. They may attempt to recoup from them,
Okay,
which may be a lost cause, but they do this, the one board up company that we use does it all over the region, and that's usually they get somebody, but, yeah. But we will not incur any bills. And still, waiting for that to happen is 2 hours. You know, you have an hour response time and an hour of work.
and maybe we wanna put some mechanism, kind of like, false alarms after so many.
Yeah, which we need one of those too.
Yeah, I mean, and another community that I'm working with right now, that they had 21 or 28 in a month. And that's an extreme example, but I just wonder if, not to add, but should there be a memechanism
Yeah.
that if you are sitting.
Yeah,
there
I have a problem child when it comes to that we need to do one of those with, but that's a whole other story.
And then the last one was just a question, are the $100 inspection fees and the $150 permit fee, how do we get those numbers? Were they, a reason for those numbers? And
Well, inspection fees have to be based on how much time you put into it and what the actual expense is. It's like typically like a permit fee would be, what's the process time? So if inspections are Jay and I, we're gonna have to figure out, basically what an hour would cost for the two of us to look at something. Cause you're gonna probably be an hour piece.
And
So that might be low.
And I think
yeah, I was thinking it was a little bit low, because
I just
everything,
threw that in there for discussion purposes, but the fee for special use would be, we can set that fee, that 150, I think is what we put in there for the moment. But you have all these different use fees in the variances and plan commission stuff now.
yeah,
There's a reason they're set at certain places, so we can hash those out with Corinne and Chris if we need to.
okay, yeah, that's all I was gonna say, that did seem low.
It's probably low.
That's it?
We can't charge permit fee for state law, but we can charge an inspection fee because it takes time to do it.
This is a special use permit, you can charge that? Okay,
Yeah, we could put a sentence somewhere leading into this that says, the suggested fees are representative, final figures will be based on estimates of actual costs. Okay, anyone else?
I just have a question. I may have missed it. When we roll this out, in whatever it looks like and the town council approves it and everything, are the owners of rental properties all gonna be aware of it, or is this gonna, how long do they have, what's the time frame for compliance? Make sure everybody has all the things that they need, their fire
Yeah,
extinguishers and everything in place that.
I wanna say, I hope it works better than the business registration, because it took us way too long to get implemented, but, we'll probably have to contact a lot of people.
Yeah.
And we've got a pretty good handle on which properties are rentals or not rentals, based on billing and stuff like that, so we'll probably have to send letters out to everybody. Is my guess.
Hey, Mike, one thing I think you should notify, maybe not you, but people, everybody on this board, if you know people that rent out their houses like over at Summer Tree, a lot of people go to Florida and they'll rent out their condo. There's no coverage under their homeowners
Good point.
if it burns, because I went to their association and I told them that. I said, my daughter said a lot of you rent out your units when you go to Florida. And the bad part there is, like where my daughter is, there's 4 units. It'd be terrible if one of them caught on fire and then there's no insurance, so the other 3 are gonna have to move out because they can't stay there. But especially with all these bed and breakfasts popping up, they better let their insurance company know. Most companies have riders for like 50 or $100 a year to put on there.
The permit requires proof of liability insurance.
Good. Well, liability and yeah, you're right, that would work.
Okay, any other comments about this document from the board?
I had one on, under the ADUs, towards the end, after item 7, so it's next to the last page, towards the bottom, where it talks about who can occupy an ADU. And under 3B, we have, may not be rented separately from the main dwelling unit. Just want to get folks' thoughts on that. Something if you have like a detached garage, maybe you have a,
Well, I think that's what remains the tough part, right, is, and no matter what you decide, it's still gonna get back to,
So I'm gonna ask the other Jim,
Oh, right here, okay.
Mandan, to join this part of the discussion.
Okay.
So let me just put a pin on this particular issue of who can rent, you know, the rental of an ADU, who can occupy it. We're gonna return to it with, because we've asked Jim in particular to comment, and I know this is part of it.
okay.
Outside of that, anything else from the commission itself?
Mike, I had a question for you. For the general long-term rentals that you're requiring now a new inspection, are you going to give those landlords a list of the requirements? Is that the idea?
We're gonna have yeah.
Okay.
The code that I'm drafting lists all those. So
Okay.
they're written in there.
That was it.
And if they
I
don't
assumed you would,
meet
but-
them when we do the inspection, then we'll have to deal with that. Jay brought one up, but we just discovered a building built in 1996 that has a bedroom with no windows in it. Trying to figure out what to do with that. I was gonna talk to Chris after the meeting about that.
Sounds like a closet to me.
There's potentially 2 of those
There
buildings.
might be 2, yes.
Okay.
And they're fourplexes where the upper level center unit has no bedroom window. And that's not legal, so how are we gonna deal with that? But anyway, yeah.
Yeah,
there's a
rolling it
list.
out's gonna,
There's a full list in the actual ordinance list, requirements for habitation, it has electrical, mechanical, everything was listed in there, room sizes, all that's in there. There's a lot of detail of technical stuff written in there.
Safety is like the
Yeah,
idea.
all that's
Okay.
in there.
Okay,
So that'll be in the ordinance section, and then when we do an inspection, it'll be against the ordinance to see if it meets their,
okay.
good question,
anything else?
sorry.
All right, well, we want to talk about this, the ADUs in general, and this, the thing that Jim Burge is raising about renting it. But let me go ahead and give the floor to Jim Mandan and ask you to comment in general about what we're doing here, and then we can come back and look at them one by one.
I'd like to come over here. I have some hearing loss, and sometimes I can't hear some of the people on this side of the room. What I'm gonna talk about are the AHU, or the auxiliary housing units, the mother-in-law's structures. Let me first start by saying that basically I would recommend against you establishing this part of your code, because I think it has lots of problems that I'll try to point out to you as I go through the process. What I tried to do was, assuming that you were going to pass this, I put down some ideas on what I thought should be included. The first is the occupant of the auxiliary housing unit, or the AHU, must be related to the owner or occupant of the primary structure. And that's a good question. Is it the owner only? Is it the occupant? Is it both? Is it either? That's one of the first questions. If somebody buys up a lot of different properties and then has the ability to put in these secondary structures, either on the second floor of an accessory structure or adding on to the primary structure with, again, a separate entrance and so forth, is that something that that would be considered plausible when you get to the point of let's see here. When you get to that point where, how do you differentiate duplex property in a single-family zone? That's basically what you'll have in terms of having different structures be occupied by different families, even if it's just a one-person family. The second is the AHU must be a portion of the principal structure or a secondary level of an accessory structure. So that limits the location and the type of structure that we're working with the auxiliary housing units. You can limit it, and it has less impact if you eliminate the second floor of an accessory structure and just have it be part of the primary structure or added onto the primary structure. That would be less offensive to properties surrounding the area that are truly single family. Number 3, I'm recommending, if you do pass this, that it cannot exceed 25% of the square footage of the balance of the living space of the principal structure. So it's not nearly as large as the principal structure, because in those cases, it does look more like a duplex lot, as opposed, if it's connected to the primary structure, as opposed to just an accessory structure that might be one bedroom or something like that, relatively small property. The AHU they're permitted on properties used for single-family purposes. That speaks for itself. The establishment of the AHU must not result in the violation of any setback, lot coverage, building height, or any other provision of the zoning ordinance. So by having this placed on a property, you can't get any closer than what the code would permit you to do anyway, especially if you're adding on to the primary structure. The auxiliary housing unit must comply with all building, health, safety, fire codes in effect at the time of the permit, which we talked about earlier. And it must have a separate entrance. The main problem is the impact that it has on the rest of the single-family dwellings that are in the area that are not going to have an auxiliary housing unit. The reason that we have a single-family zone is separate from zoning districts that permit more than one unit is for that very purpose, to keep housing units consistent within that zone. So you don't have a mishmash of different uses, on a one particular block or one particular neighborhood. So that's basically why I think that the AHUs probably would not be a good idea to add to the code. I wish there was a way that we could look at individual cases and either grant or deny them when they came before either the BZA or special use, some mechanism like that. But I don't think we have anything like that in the law that permits us to do that. If you allow it by right, then obviously you have to permit it everywhere by right throughout the whole town. So it's limited to single family, but it turns that neighborhood or that block into a mixture of single family and multifamily. The other thing that is very challenging is if a property owner develops a auxiliary housing unit on their property for their father or mother or some relative, and then that relative passes on, or they sell the structure, the new owners would probably be interested in renting that particular unit out to someone other than a relative. And the whole inspection process that you talked about earlier is going to tax several staff people several hours. Could you imagine trying to track down who is living in an auxiliary housing unit and whether or not they're related to the people in the principal structure? That's going to be very difficult for any staff person to do. And if you don't do that, if it's really open to renting to anyone, then it looks more and more like a duplex property. So my recommendation is to not do it, not add it to your code. Or questions, or?
Yeah, Jim, I'm listening to what you're saying, I'm trying to process it, I'm a really visual person. Is there an example that you can give?
I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, I'm a very visual person. Is there an example that maybe you can give in town, whereas like if they put an accessory, like an AHU or an ADU
Right.
on the property, look how horrible this would look for us, and look what damages will do. Is there an example, like that you can think of? Because I just can only think of my street, and I can think of a couple other neighborhoods, even though it's small.
There aren't very many communities that have actually passed it by right, so there's not a lot of examples except the ones that are done without the town's knowledge.
Well, I don't know, Chicago, all of Chicago has ADUs.
Well, I mean, in our area,
Oh,
in
okay.
Lincoln Porter County, this particular area.
Is there, because I'm just thinking of the units that I've seen that have been that way, and I really don't think they've changed the character of the neighborhood, and I also don't think that people have come and been very upset that it's now multifamily and the density is so different. So, but I'm thinking if there's an example, like, and you don't have to, I don't want me to put you on the spot, you can give it to me later, like, hey, by the way, if you look at this street, if any of these houses become ADUs, it's really gonna change the character. But I would appreciate that, if I could have a more
Okay.
visual.
Okay, yes.
I have a question based on that, because I feel like, okay, so there are things like that going on already a little bit, but if we have it spelled out and maybe it's gonna say, oh, people are gonna think, well, maybe I should do that, maybe I should do that. And I think that if we have it there, it's like if everyone if you open it, it will come, and then it will change the look and feel of many possible neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's the best thing.
Well,
In
and
what
I mean,
way? Like,
well,
I'd like to see that
I'll
example.
give an example, which don't wanna go too far because there's pending litigation, but that
I
Hillbrick
just gotta
property.
bring that up.
The Hillbrick property that got some heat,
In
and it's,
Michigan City?
it was, no, here, it was a family home that they added to, maybe not legal over the years of how it developed. It's essentially a duplex now. Young gentleman bought it as an investment with the hope to rent out both sides. Realized he needed a variance, came for a variance, and the remonstrators felt very strongly, and then there's a developer builder next door who bought that property to build a home, and he said, I don't want to have, if they were gonna do that, I would build duplexes. The other neighbors, they were very vocal about not wanting a duplex in their neighborhood, so that's an example. It's under litigation right now because they're appealing their decision, from the BZA, so I don't wanna go too, but that's an example.
There was a strong, with the apartment project that we approved and then it fell apart, almost all of the remonstrators were because it was renters versus owners. There's a very strong presence of people who don't want renters.
At least there's a perception out there.
And that was
that if you have
what happened
rental
with
units,
duplex.
especially multifamily rental units,
Yeah.
duplexes, triplexes,
Yeah.
your 4-unit buildings, whatever, in the same neighborhood as single family, that it detracts from the price,
Yeah.
from the value of the single family.
Exactly what
I
happened.
don't know if that's true or not, I'm assuming that it is, but it's certainly a
Yeah.
perception.
I never like that argument, I feel like it's so subjective, I don't know.
And that's literally what we just had with the one he's talking about, is they had a related living set up. He wanted to make it a duplex. I said, you have to get a use variance because we don't allow that. And he got denied, and the remonstrators all said the same thing. They don't want a duplex there, detracts from this, that, or the other. Single-family zoning, they don't want multifamily, and that was the entire reason for the remonstrating.
And then
Exact
to-
thing.
Something else that came up too, a few minutes ago when we were talking earlier, what conditions or what setbacks and height requirements and bulk and distance requirements do you impose on a separate building, accessory structure that's used both for a garage, basically, and also a unit upstairs, a housing unit?
Or would,
Do you impose the housing structure setbacks and so forth.
Well, we talked about that's gonna trigger the need to then overhaul the code in general, or
That's right.
make a special exception. What if somebody puts, you know, a glorified she shed or a tiny home, right? That's what I envision is if somebody
I mean,
could
one of
put
the main
in.
ideas for setbacks is fire safety. You know, to have some separation between structures, so you don't have them, you know, next to each other and the whole block goes up. Now, that's just one, but, you know, noise, you know, also is an issue, fugitive light. If you have two units that are, if we use the 5 feet of a setback for an accessory structure and have two units upstairs that are living units, then you have these structures 10 feet apart, instead of what would normally be required, which would be much more than that.
Mhm.
So, you know, that's another issue, you have to go through your entire code and determine what conditions you're gonna place on these new structures that you don't have before.
And that's where I think, just on the heels of that, and then now,
Right,
I
go
think the enforceability and the post initial, let's say you do it, you have the best of intentions, you have both sides and your in-laws and you've survived, and then BlackRock comes in, right, and they buy up
Right.
property and they're absentee owners, but they're renting in general. I think that enforcement and really, it's up to you, right? What's the character? What do you intend the town to be? And I give as an example, again, Carmel, I think we talked about it a few meetings ago, you know, and you can read some articles, they haven't forever, but they've been up to the brink in some of those other communities, Fishers, et cetera, to discuss it, and then they vote it down because they get to these issues and they don't know how to resolve, because there isn't a clear-cut answer that,
Yeah.
what's next, all right? We get it past the level of where the people have the right intentions or they're converting existing. Now we have people who want to buy new. Is it allowed everywhere? And then how do we not only enforce, is it related parties? And the taxing that's gonna do, but then do you really want to change, you know, your street? You might not, and that's okay, right? Those are just the questions is, are we gonna become a duplex community, for instance?
Well, if I may, I really think that, you know, whatever we do now with all of this, we're setting the tone for the future. We're not 10 years, we're 20 years, whatever it is. So if we plant some seeds like this now, and we get a lot of investors, because that is a wave, and, you know, the whole I work in the real estate industry, I just got back from Houston. It changes, everything's changing, and we have to be prepared and think about it in a broader sense. And I'm selfishly, I want to protect our town in the flavor it has, and because it's wonderful, and so.
So going back to that point and what Jim said, if you were, I'm not advocating one way or the other, if you were to not address the ADUs, then you're back to what his suggestion was, is you do handle them on a case by case. Somebody comes to you for a variance because I have an elderly in-law and we need to do this and we want to build something above our garage, and they ask for the appropriate variance on a case by case basis versus as of right. So that might be the alternative way to consider it.
But even on a case-by-case basis, you're saying if the in-law dies, then you need to find another in-law to move in there because,
Well, it's a tough, it leads you back to some of the, but it won't be as widespread. Yeah, but I think you get the same issues.
I could think of two instances in town right now where people have a detached garage, and they have like an apartment it's been there a long time, but it was a part of that structure, and another where there's an apartment above the garage. In one case, the folks are in retirement, so being able to rent that is that extra income that helps them stay afloat and keep their place.
Sure.
The other one is a single person, young, was a first-time homeowner, but young, maybe a first time, and having that separate garage with an apartment above it. That income from that is the difference between being able to swing the mortgage or not swing it, to have their own place. In both those cases, it's a very positive situation by having that.
yeah, I might agree with you, and I think it really speaks a lot to our comprehensive plan. I do think it goes along with it. We are, by the nature of our location, a very tourist, people that we need to stay, and those are the people that spend money here. People that we need to stay, and those are the people that spend money here, right? But not only that, you know, we always, in the comprehensive plan, we talk about the need for middle housing. This is the need. We talk about, you know, the ability for people to age, like you said, not only young people that would help swing the mortgage, but older people as well. I know my neighbor is looking into this, was very excited. You know, she has a 2-acre lot and she wants an ADU. The other alternative is she can divide her lot and build another home, but the ADU would almost be better. It's like less density, right? And so I would encourage her to do the ADU versus build another home, and it would help her and it would help her family. But yeah, I do think it speaks really strongly to our comprehensive plan. And I can't see with these two requirements that you're not allowed to rent them separately, because that, once the owner occupied leaves, you can't rent them separately. You have to rent them as a unit, right? And I think that keeps the code intact, keeps the zoning intact, keeps single family there. You cannot have garage apartment, primary dwelling, 2 families. You cannot have that. You would have to have them, that single family would be renting the entire unit.
But how do you verify
I mean, that's another question, but we'll get.
that? That's
But-
a difficult question.
But Mike, I think, has that situation where he has verified that, haven't you? Like,
Well, there's
If they wanna cooperate.
There's already some illegal setups like that, where they didn't get approval. So they're just there.
well, now don't
They're
you have the tools
non-conforming,
to,
But they're not legal, because we don't know when they put them in, so we can't check those. I know of a couple of existing units that have family members in them, and they're still that way, and that's great. But at some point, it's gonna be, how do we know if something changes?
but when you,
Unless we're combing the obituaries and.
listen,
where we know they
but
moved
does
out.
it matter if nobody's
do we know?
complaining? You're gonna know when people complain, and if nobody's complaining, what's the big deal, right?
Well, if no one's complaining, that's the problem we're having now, is everybody's breaking the law and nobody's enforcing anything. And that's just growing by leaps and bounds, and we're trying to fight against that right now with the code enforcement on the cars and everything else. Because everybody basically is just running around willy-nilly doing whatever they want to, and we're trying to stop that. So that's the difference between trying to enforce laws and just having chaos, and we're trying to avoid the chaos.
But now don't you have, the plan is to have more tools in your toolbox to be able to enforce that and to have the fines and penalties that would prevent those types of things?
Well, we're trying to do that, but it's not as easy as you think it is. And this kind of just creates de facto duplexes everywhere if there's no way to enforce it.
Well, I disagree I disagree if you put one idea that I really liked that you had, and I thought it was really, is to make sure that it's not to exceed 25% of the principal structure.
Right.
So it's like 500 unit, like that is not a duplex. Like if I've got a 2,000 square foot home, I could only add on 500 square feet. And I don't think that's creating duplexes everywhere.
Well, what I mean by duplex is 2 rentals. So there's a duplex legally has requirements that are different from a single-family house. And the biggest one is it has to be separated by a firewall. That's in the International Building Code. So if we're creating de facto duplexes that don't meet the duplex code, that's really a bad thing to do. There's a reason there's a firewall, because there's 2 separate owners, and I don't wanna burn down your house, and you don't wanna burn down my house. How do you ensure that? Back to Jim's point. So there's a reason there's a duplex follows a specific law, that they're separated by fire separation, because you have 2 different people renting a building that aren't related. So this opens up a big can of worms of different things if they're not related. But how do you prove they're related? So now we're joking, you can't give DNA tests to people and start, I need your ID to see if you're related to the other person. That seems to be way beyond the bounds of what we ought to be inspecting. So you're gonna assume people are gonna try and follow the spirit of the law. I think most people will, but there's a lot of people out there who literally call me and say, hey, I wanna buy this property, can I build an ADU on it? Because they wanna rent it to 2 different people. And that's what we don't want.
So I agree with all the discussion so far. I want to add to that, the particular issue that Jim Burge was highlighting addresses it in a way.
Yeah.
Imperfect, because as Mike points out, somebody's always gonna try to game the system. ADUs may not be rented separately from the main dwelling unit. I don't care if they're related or not.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's the thing.
They can't rent it,
right.
right? Your grandma's there, that's fine.
Yeah, you're not supposed to rent it.
You can't rent it. Is there a way to game
That
that?
stops a lot of
Of course there is. But that is a way of addressing it. You don't have to prove that they're related or unrelated.
just can't rent
They simply can't rent it. And, which circles back to your question. Was that what you were trying to clarify?
Well, the thought I was having is, I don't know that I don't think I'm in favor of not being able to rent it. I think of like when I've traveled before, whether it be for business or pleasure, and like Airbnb, and people would have like a pool house or something, it's a separate dwelling. The people live there, live in the main house. It's that auxiliary building, it's just a room with a small kitchenette, bedroom, a small living room, and very inexpensive. You have your own access, to get in and out. It seems to make a lot of sense for them. It allows them to better afford their mortgage, so it seems to create a win-win.
But from your perspective, I think the overriding thing is then you get back to what do you want? And as you refer to your comprehensive plan, while it might provide for housing, and again, this is just food for thought, not me advocating the position. While it might plan for housing, is that transient housing? Is that tourist housing, or is that more permanent housing so it's in your community? People that live here, going to schools that have that. So it might be income based, and you might want to be transient, touristy community. As your example, when I'm traveling for work, when I'm traveling for vacation, I love that option. It's great and convenient for me. Where I live, I don't want that next to me, right? And so that's what I think you guys have to get your mind around is what does your comprehensive plan? Because I think once you open that door, it might change the nature, it might not. It might really just legitimize what already goes on, right? So
Right, I think,
Another issue is that the reason that you have a minimum square footage requirement for single-family homes is you want a certain level of investment in that building. And you want that to be somewhat, consistent throughout the block and throughout the neighborhood. You don't want the ability to have like a house that's 750 square feet next to one that's 2,500, that sort of thing. And that's what you're going to have. You're going to have additional structures within the same, if it's a separate building and not added on to the existing building.
I do think, I like that point that you brought up. It does legitimize what we already have, that situation that you described. I did that for 6 years in this community. You couldn't stop me from doing it again. I do not need permits or anything. It's my home. What are you gonna do? I can rent out to whoever I want, as long as I'm there, right? Once I leave, now you have some powers to do things. But I think in terms of what I do with my own home, I mean, you might as well take advantage of that and get some safety laws and some inspections going on and some income into the community, because when I didn't have to pay a mortgage and I was making that Airbnb money, what was I doing? I was taking my family out to eat. We were buying ice cream at Dosh Days.
But getting back to the initial idea of why you would want an extra unit is take care of maybe an elderly person or even a younger person who maybe is not married yet and wants to live with relatives. You can do the same thing by expanding the size of the principal structure. You don't have to have a separate structure or even a separate entrance. Without the ordinance, you can do that right now. You can add another bedroom, another bathroom, and have the rest of the house be open to the person also who's added to the family. So you can take care of family members by adding structure to the existing principal structure. And that way it stays principal, there's no separate entrance, and there's no need for a change in the code.
And that was your second recommendation.
Yeah.
And if you, insurance-wise, if you have a second floor, you better have 2 exits. Because your insurance companies will not insure it, or they'll back off if you have a loss, which Chris, I don't know if you're aware of it, when the FOP died, burned down and next to my office, the lady upstairs died because she couldn't get down, and there's a nice lawsuit on that, because there was no second entrance. So
Well,
if
the
you're
buil-
gonna put it on
The
Belknap,
building permit is gonna catch any deficiencies.
So okay, Tara's right, you can rent a room in your house anytime you want to.
Right.
There's no requirement of, you can rent, so the rental code would cover renting a whole house, you can rent a room, doesn't matter. Short-term rental counts that. The only thing the ADU is really talking about is a whole, this whole different item, but if you can't rent the ADU, that sort of solves what you were talking about. If you can't rent it, it's just for that purpose, you can never rent it out. I mean, if we
Yes,
say-
you have more square.
If we were gonna do that, we just say that's for the thing. I actually had somebody call me and tell me this. This is just a little levity, okay? They said, hey, I'm really interested in putting in a in-law suite. Okay, why don't you just add on to your house? Well, we don't want her in the house. We want her in a separate space.
Might be vice versa
Yeah,
too.
I mean, it's lovely. But, saying you can't rent it out sort of helps solve the issue, because you can rent a room in your house, there's nothing stopping you from doing that. Sure. And you could do the whole house rental, you could do the short-term rental, so this is, how do we not have them make duplexes? You say you can't rent it, that certainly covers that.
I think it just boils down to is what kind of town we want to be. I've moved to this town because I'm a half mile from the beach.
Mm-hmm.
We live in the biggest tourism area in Indiana, the
Mhm.
Indiana State Park. It's beautiful. We happen to live next to a major metropolitan city, and I mean, that's why we're so popular. People just flock here because it's a short drive from Chicago.
Because they don't wanna live in the major metropolitan city.
Well, it's a short drive from Chicago, and I think we've always been. I mean, I think it's the gateway to the dunes. I think it's in our slogan. I think we've always been this way. There's all those little houses, that were built as little bungalows. The whole Porter Beach was.
They're not even bungalows.
Well, Porter
little
Beach
shacks.
was always advertised, as this with the idea to bring people from Chicago here. I think the town was built in that way, and I think it's a great way forward. And I think it says so in our comprehensive plan. That's why I like it, and I like the idea of renting it.
Yeah, we're not in Levittown. We're really, Jay knows this better than anybody. We're like 6 different towns, extremely different things. What Tara's referring to, 25-foot lots and they're still living in them, right? You've got downtown Porter where creating an accessory dwelling unit on the back of one of these, it's impossible. The only thing you could do is add a structure. You got people who live on Oak Hill or Mineral Springs who have 6 acres or more. One glove doesn't fit everybody's hand here. There's no question that the intent and the effect of allowing however it's regulated, allowing accessory dwelling, accessory housing uses, does increase density. That was the intention. The goals were to allow aging in place and to increase the housing supply. It does that. We can modify it more than it's modified here. Jim's got some suggestions there. For instance, he's saying, his second suggestion was, there's not another unit. You can build up. You can build up, you can build a little bit out on the primary, you can modify it. But there's no question, the intention was, yeah, we're trying, it will affect the density of that particular area right there. And that was the goal. Allow aging in place, increase housing supply.
And when we talked about this before, after COVID, but a lot of this came up from COVID where people wanted to move their in-laws or relatives in with them. And there was a lot of, this kind of boomed right after COVID where people were like, well, I want to put an in-law suite in so that I can deal with my parents. And then of course, the cost of construction went way up. So the other reason is trying to save some money, right? Like Tara said, try to save some money. Have their in-laws move in with them. And if the intent is, we all intend this to be some sort of related living, but that's just how do you not have it go off in the wrong direction? That's what we're trying to talk about.
So, and the imperfect solution that we talked about last time was the thing that Jim said, 3B. You can do it, but then you can't rent it. Could you rent the whole house? Yes. To Terrace Point, could you rent a room in the house? Nothing's stopping you. You can do it. But you can't create a separate thing over here in an R1, and then you can't rent that separate. You can put your mom in there. You can put anybody in there. You can rent your friend in there. We're not gonna check relation, but you can't.
I think I said this before, my house was built, was bought in a foreclosure, but the intent was to put the mother and mother-in-law in, so it's a ranch house that's on top of a ranch house. So the basement has a master bedroom and
Yeah.
bedroom, bath, another bedroom, bathroom, another kitchen, and a living room. And then both of the mother-in-law and mother passed away, and the guy couldn't finish it and got sold at foreclosure is how the house was purchased. So it's kind of an odd house that way. It would be a wonderful place to have an Airbnb or regular B&B, but I just don't want anybody in my house.
Yeah.
So we don't want anybody over in our house. We have plenty of room for people, we just don't want them there. So there's different ways of looking at that. I've stayed in a lot of, not Airbnbs so much as regular bread and breakfast, but I've stayed in places like that. It's fun to talk to people, and some people enjoy that.
And
I just wouldn't want them at my house, that's all. We have 4 dogs, and I gotta deal with the dog issue, that's the reason. But I don't want, we don't want people over. We don't want to deal with it. I like staying in them, but I don't want them in my house, so
I have
that's the way we look at it.
a few questions, concerns on the whole thing. One is, again, as we're talking demographics of adding more residents, potentially more residents to downtown Porter, where we already have 0 parking and very hard time for my guys to get fire trucks through the area. I completely agree about trying to figure out a way to allow parents, college kids, whatever, to live on my property and have a way to not be in my house and have all of that. I support all of that. I get a little concerned when we're talking about building the auxiliary structures, especially above garages, because what type of protections are we putting in there with firewalls and drywalling the ceilings of the garages? And then you have one tenant up here and the other tenant who uses the garage, who may not care if he leaves his car running or runs his lawnmower in there, or what chemicals he stores in his garage. How do we regulate that to make sure the one that has control of the garage isn't doing something in danger the one upstairs that a 3/4 sheet of plywood or drywall is not going to protect them from? So I have those concerns. I have, on a firefighting standpoint, concerns with any of the single-family houses that make add-ins that are such as, grandma suite or in-law suites or whatever, because that adds usually a trick to us in finding access, especially in fire conditions. Now, it doesn't happen very often, but I bring that up because I experienced a near emergency because trying to get tangled up in a added on in-law suite to a large house that they walled off, and it was basically almost like a Batman movie. It was a bookcase that led. So anyway, so keep all of that in mind when we're thinking about all these things. Because I'm all about bringing people to the town and increasing, but anything that brings more vehicles to downtown area makes my job much harder. Anything that adds people to residents, especially if we have additions that we don't know about and stuff, can potentially make my job harder or more dangerous. And keep in mind when we start throwing all these inspection words out that I am a man of one and so is Michael, and we have a million other things on our plates too. So it is about impossible, especially if we hit a rush of these, to maintain it all on our end to make sure that that's above bar and we're getting those protections in. But I really have an issue with
The
one.
much bigger issue with that is the rental inspection period, nothing to do with ADUs, everything else.
Well,
That's
we're
where
gonna
the
start
line.
building tons of apartments above garages when people see this. I mean, if I could have built a in-law suite in my backyard for my mom instead of putting her in a nursing home, I would have done it in a heartbeat. But
Could you not have? You just, not because of this, but because you didn't have the.
just the situation with the way my house is built, and sits on my property, I just didn't.
Oh,
I
okay.
didn't see it feasible. I mean, I could have done it if I wanted to ruin everything, but.
Okay.
Okay, I think a lot of issues have been brought up. Every one of them is addressed by the 6 points that Jim made. Let me make a suggestion for how to move forward right now. Jim suggested 6 things. I think 3 of them are essentially in there. We may have to fiddle with the wording, but Mike's get that, but I'm not too worried about that. those are adhere to all the codes, adhere to all development codes, adhere to all the health and standards, and a separate entrance. Those are actually, I believe they're dealt in here. If they're not, Mike knows that, by the letter, it's the spirit is in here, Mike knows it there. The other three are substantive, right? One is, who can occupy it, make it family only? But we've all discussed, and Jim's pointed out, that's an enforcement issue. The second thing he talked about was, okay, but do this so it's only for, it is a portion of the primary unit only. That addresses a lot of things about the garage, et cetera. I mean, a whole lot of others just go out with that one. And then the third one was adding that there would be a limitation on the space so that it could be no greater than some percentage, Jim threw out 25% of what the remaining of the unit is. Here's what I suggest. 4, 5, and 6, I think we're covered close enough to what Jim's suggesting. I suggest we talk through 1, 2, and 3, just do a straw vote here on them. And if you, but remember, Jim's real suggestion is just don't do it, right? Let me suggest that we say, if we're gonna keep the ADU in here, let's talk about 1, 2, and 3. When we're done with those straw votes and decide that, then I'll say, okay, do we still want to include the whole AD unit or not? And let's get a straw vote on that, okay?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's not, we can have as much discussion as we want. This isn't Robert's Rules of Order. This is a trying to get consensus. I'm seeing a straw vote as a way of measuring our consensus, okay? All right, so number 1. Jim's first suggestion was that the occupancy of the AHU must be related only. We talked about this, it was written up in the thing here. I know that I wanted it in the first place. I know that people on the council, beyond Jim, kind of wanted it. I know it's much more politically palatable, but we decided, for all the reasons we've talked about previously and again tonight, we decided to say, no, we won't do that. We're gonna handle the issue by this 3B thing that Jim's talking about instead. So let me ask you, do you want to consider changing it back so that ADUs must be only occupied by related people? Show of hands.
Not sure, I wanna make sure I'm clear on what you're meaning
I
by
would
all this.
personally, but go ahead.
Catch where I'm at. I don't know where it was. We talked about whether it couldn't be rented, which we can have them, but you can't rent them separately.
Yeah, it's really the second half of the fifth.
Well, wouldn't
page.
we, if we have them, but we can't rent them separately, does that line matter?
Doesn't matter, right?
It doesn't matter, because one part we're saying you can have them, they can't be separate, or you can't rent them, and the other part we're talking about renting them. We're kind of contradicting in our own thing here.
The question is, can you rent the auxiliary unit separately?
But now again, I'm not finding it right off my back, but aren't we saying in the part that we're approving that Jim had is that it says it can't be rented separately? Aren't we already saying yes to that it can't be rented separately on one of these other?
Yeah, that's the way it is right now.
Well, I'm not sure I understand when you say rent it separately. You mean the fact that the owner has to own both structures, first off, and the owner has to live in the primary structure in order to use the secondary structure?
But then mother-in-law passes and Jimmy is a traveling nurse and wants to live in town and rent it, right? That's talking about a stranger.
I mean,
Unrelated
to place the
person.
most restrictions possible on it and still permitted, you first off want the property to be owner occupied instead of rental, the primary structure, you want it owner occupied. And you want the same, the family member who's living in the auxiliary unit has to be a family member of the principal structure.
Right?
So that really puts a lot of constraint on it.
But that's the crux of the issues.
I don't-
That might not be the consensus of what.
Yeah,
Commission
I don't
votes.
wanna ask for birth certificates and marriage certificates, I do wanna ask for your lease agreement. And that, I think, is what I want to do. I don't even understand how you would enforce this related only thing. I think the other, renting it out separately with an owner occupied person, it's a pain in the butt, but I can see how you do it. And I can see it's a little bit more normal than saying, well, show me your birth certificate and the family tree. I couldn't imagine the government coming and saying that to me. But show me the lease agreement, who's on the lease agreement, that's totally acceptable. Show me your mortgage, or you're the owner occupied, your name's on there, it matches your license, I think that that's enforceable. I don't understand how you would enforce the related only, that's my only
The
issue.
next question is, how do you sell the property then? You know, if you can only use the property for your relatives, and the next purchaser doesn't have any old relatives.
They're not saying that, they're saying you can rent it now, it doesn't matter just.
Yeah.
what
It
her-
doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's what, I
Yeah, and
think
in
that's
that
the
case, it's
difference.
the same, for the next owner, you know, if you wanna rent in this town, you're gonna fill out the registration, we're gonna have the owner occupied, and, we're gonna have the lease agreement.
Which
like
then,
the owner
that gets to
occupied,
Rob's
that's-
point is, do you want Jim's suggestion as to family only, or are we just gonna have it as it's
I
written
did not
there?
put my hand up for family only.
Right, right.
If you say you can't rent it at all, though, you're not gonna get a whole bunch of people wanting to build it unless it's for their family member. Because their family member's not gonna pay rent, they're just gonna live in it.
No, correct.
So if you say you can't rent it, you eliminate the entire problem of trying to deal with relatives and
But I
IDs.
think-
I also
And
put
that
my
was-
hand down for that.
Yeah, I think your commission's saying they want to
A lot of
rent them, that's the issue is,
Yeah.
again, legitimizing what already goes on, or
I
changing
think it
what
already-
your focus of your community is.
I vote for that, because then I don't have to worry about it.
Well, I vote,
If
I
the,
think
if the spirit of an ADU is for related living, and saying you can't rent it meets the spirit of the ADU. If you're trying to, again, create de facto duplexes, then that's why you want it rented.
I don't
That's a
think,
whole different thing.
I think the
And
premise is
Buy
wrong.
property
I'm trying to say that, that's an entirely different code issue.
It's not the spirit of the ADU. The spirit of the ADU is to create middle housing and to help people
No, it's
live.
not, it's related living.
Is it
That's
only
all it's
related
for.
living?
That is the spirit of it, I'm
Spirit
not
of it
saying
is
how it
related,
develops,
Yeah.
but what drives that is to have your in-laws that are aging in place, to use Rob's term. That's the spirit of what's
And if
driving
you
that
don't-
concept.
If you don't
And
rent
it's
it, you
gonna-
don't have to worry about
That's
it.
why towns are shying away like Carmel, because they don't have those answers.
There's, I like the idea of this tool, for accomplishing some goals in our comprehensive plan, which again, just, that's why I like that tool. It has nothing to do with related
What
living.
is it accomplishing in the comprehensive plan?
Middle housing and giving people the ability to age in this community. Have you seen the referendums? Have you seen your taxes? And it's only going up, and inflation is a problem too. I might be bartering eggs next week. I don't know.
But don't you favor, being able to rent it to anyone, not a
Yes.
relative?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Well,
that's-
what you end up with then, you're basically coming up with a substandard structure
Mhm.
in an R1 district, and you have an R2 use in a R1 district, deteriorating property values of neighboring properties. So that's what you're gonna end up with.
I don't understand why I would, if I'm doing a ADU on my property, why I would want a substandard structure attached to my primary residence.
Well,
I think
If it's-
that, I
If it's
just don't.
500 square feet, or even 700 square feet, it's substandard from an R1 requirement. What's the square
1200
footage, 12?
So when you say substandard, you're not saying poor quality.
Size.
You're saying at odds with R1.
And investment.
That's what
The
he
amount of
means by-
investment.
And whether you want to live in all
Okay, but
zoning
the-
districts, but going back to your point, is the overall consensus, before you go to each point, is the overall consensus that you have the ADU discussion at all, right? That probably should be the jumping off point.
Well, I thought about doing it that way, but I thought maybe if we went through it, we'd figure out what it was that we were gonna say thumbs up or thumbs down to.
Well, I think-
I know you do it either way.
Well, I think you have some pretty divergent, I don't know, the pulse seems to be that you're split, your commission. So-
Well, the question was,
I don't know.
Nobody
Should-
put hand up.
the first question was,
hands up for
the first
that.
question was, should we restrict it to family members only? And I saw one person say yes. I didn't see any other person say yes to that.
At this point, that's where I'm at. I may not have raised my hand during
Okay.
that question.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Mike, bring up the one that came in front of the BZA. That's what that was. Was it that, it was,
It was related living,
yeah, explain it.
two separate doors, but they were connected inside.
Separate electric,
And he put up a wall in the room, and let's just say we stopped him because he didn't have a permit. So, when I looked at it, and what he intended to do with it is make a duplex out of it, I said, you have to get a use variance for a duplex, because that's a totally different thing than, a single-family house. It has code requirements for a duplex. So he applied for a use variance, he didn't get his use variance, so he's appealing that right now. The duplex is separated by a firewall, and there's different issues with it. That house has two separate sets of NIPSCO utilities. The parents lived in the front, and the son lived in the rear. So there's separate furnaces, electrical, everything's separated. But they were connected through a room, and even though there's two separate doors. So to make it a duplex to rent to two different groups of people requires a use variance, because we don't have an ADU clause, and you'd have to build a firewall in between them, because you're specifically, by code, required to do that, to make a duplex.
Which kind of brings up another point, do you have an amnesty provision, right? For someone like that, who over the years accumulated into an illegal property, they're mostly there,
Yeah.
but then allow them, they can apply for their special use, right? And as long as they bring it up to code, your
Right.
firewall, et cetera.
I do think what you guys are both talking about are just in-law suites. You don't want any ADUs. In-law suites are already allowed. They're not rentable. You can do it, right?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, like an in-law suite doesn't have like a separate entrance and all that
It's
stuff.
inside of the house.
Yeah.
Yeah, that,
But
No, these are-
ADUs
these are
conceptually
separated.
do have the
Yeah.
additional things.
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
you're a
and so that's
separate
why I
unit.
think you should ask if you even want those.
well, actually, in-law suites aren't allowed either, because per code, a single-family house doesn't have two entrances, as most of them want. They want separate entrances. They don't have separate entrances. As soon as you start putting in a separate kitchen and bathroom, that throws up a flag for me that you're trying to make a duplex out of something. So when somebody says it's an in-law suite, we don't really have that at all written in there right now. So you can build a house and put a kitchenette in your basement or something like that, because you're not obviously intending to do something
In a single-family
nefarious.
home, you could have two kitchens, you could
Yeah.
have three bathrooms. or
You can do whatever you
four
want in your
bathrooms,
house, so you can
Yeah.
build that inside the house. It's when you start going, well, I want a separate entrance and I wanted this.
Right.
Then you're creating something that's not codified, right? But you can build an in-law suite in your house now, there's no issue with it.
Right.
It's when you start going, well, I wanna put it in the garage, I wanna separate it. We don't have that covered right now,
Well, and I think
it's a different thing.
a lot of it, what holds me back on a lot of this is our town isn't designed to double the intensity for population in most of our areas. I mean, downtown, even Porter Cove. I mean, you drive down Porter Cove, those streets are narrow and packed with cars, and that's a newer subdivision. My subdivision's that way. I mean, I barely can fit my truck without blocking my driveway because of my neighbors.
Yeah.
And we're talking about increasing our density, we're not set up for that. I mean, if we were a town that had better public transportation, where every family member did have a car, maybe we wouldn't have that issue, but our streets can't handle the density of adding an extra.
I think not all streets can handle the density. It's not a one-size-fits-all. Some streets are.
Well, as we say, we allow one, we have to allow all.
Do we though?
Unless you don't allow it in all zoning districts, right? I mean, I think that's where,
All right,
or do you start to only allow so many, that's,
Well, or another thing is if you constrain it such that it's not a practical solution in certain cases. Take, for instance, say we took Jim's second and third suggestions, right? So it's only gonna be a modification of the primary. Second of all, the size of it is limited to a percentage of that's there. That's gonna reduce the attractiveness to some places. If you got 5 acres, it won't, you won't have a problem with that. If you got a sprawling home, you can do it. So that may mitigate some of the problems while still allowing us to achieve the goal of allowing aging in place, allowing family living, and frankly, expanding the housing supply in a fractional way. So that is a possible way to go forward. That's not the way this is written right now, though we would have to change what we're talking about here so that it is restricted only to primary units, and we'd have to set that restriction in there. I'm in favor of that. I still feel like the accessory dwelling unit is good for the reasons that that the document itself says it is. And I think that is consistent with, as Tara says, the comprehensive plan. I can see the strong merit of the concerns that have to be addressed here. I still feel like the family is absolutely unenforceable. And our 3B solution to once you can rent it is an imperfect way to deal with that. So were we to go forward with we're bringing the accessory dwelling unit to have guidelines that tell you when you can build it, I'd be in favor of that. Here's my only concern, and we can just say, just drop the accessory dwelling unit. We need the rest of it, let's go forward. My concern is that doesn't really address the issue. We're just handing it over to the BZA, and they're gonna have to deal with all the issues that we're trying here. And there won't be any guardrails, and what anybody comes in on any day will depend on the strength of their argument, how effective they were, and we actually will be losing control of it.
Well, how so though? I mean, you're not getting bombarded by requests now.
No,
I would say there's a storm over the horizon,
Yeah, I'm waiting for this to go through.
you know?
One thing that we haven't really addressed though for the ADUs is the size of the lot or the size of the property, because that could have a major impact. Like, I have almost 6 acres. That'd be pretty simple for mine. It wouldn't impact much of anything. But if you try to go downtown or Porter Cove,
Well, that's
that's a major impact on the local community.
I mean,
So maybe
the
there's something-
majority of our town is set up that way, where it's, everything is so tight. I mean, the people that live across the street, they couldn't do it.
Well, to
That
play
one little lot that I think your family lives behind, that little lot couldn't do it because they wouldn't have a place to park.
But to play devil's advocate, to Tara's point, the people who, to accomplish the goals of that middle housing and to help out those that allows them to make a little more income to help their households make ends meet, right? It's not the 6-acre lots, it's the ones that are the
Oh,
other-
I don't know,
Right?
I don't know.
necessarily. So the issue becomes, again, is it in every zoning district? Is it in every subdivision? Because that's gonna change the nature, and I don't disagree. Or it may lead to them asking for some other variances by which they can't qualify, right? Because it will become 75% coverage or something. So there are some checks and balances that probably, and again, leads to you overhauling and making sure the code reconciles that even downtown with the best of intentions, hey, we're open and listening to everybody on that special exception, but now you're gonna have a setback issue, now you're gonna have a lot coverage issue, a height issue, so it may get legislated out anyway, and they might not be able to.
And the recommendations in here is that we don't change any of those things, any of the development standards. The one thing that is in here that Jim's second suggestion would change is we said, well, but you could put another building over there if you had room. Subject to all the setbacks and everything else. But there's a kind of a neat solution of putting tighter guardrails on it if we took Jim's second suggestion.
we've got special.
And let me just say one more thing. And then the person who has, not to pick on you, 6 acres, if they really want another thing, they have other options too. They can subdivide and all sorts of stuff. And they can go to the BZA and say, well, I want something different.
Well, I can see someone coming in and purchasing a property, already with an existing garage. And the garage is 10 feet or 5 feet away from the property line. And they have someone, their mother, father, whatever, that they want to build a second story on the garage. And if we impose the requirements of residential setbacks, then they're not gonna follow that, or they're gonna be basically requiring a variance for that. And then when they go to the BCA, what's the developmental difficulty? They can keep it as a garage, they just can't add a second structure to it. So the BCA would be hard pressed to approve that.
Good.
Because there really is no difficulty on the property as it exists. They just want to do something above and beyond what exists.
So that doesn't sound like a problem. That sounds like a problem
they
that
would get
solves
turned down.
itself. Yeah,
Right.
they would get turned down. Right.
Well, how so? So if you're saying if they wanted to build it on their garage or add to the,
No, if they had an existing garage, it's
Yes.
5 feet away from the property line,
yes?
and they want to build a second story or
Yeah.
a housing unit, 500 square feet or whatever.
Sure.
Um,
I don't think
these
that'd be a
neighbors-
problem. So if I'm using your example though,
Yeah.
the problem is an encroachment issue, right? Like
Right.
but if they're building up, they're not expanding that encroachment.
But the setback is not 5 feet anymore because you added a residential structure on the second floor.
It's not an encroaching garage. It would become an encroaching building.
You mean
If-
by the use, residential use instead of accessory use.
See, now you're imposing residential requirements for
Right.
setback, because you're adding a residence.
If it's still an accessory structure, the accessory structure rules don't change. What I was gonna say was, we've got a special use permit in for a short-term rental, can we do a special use permit for an ADU? Because then you cover, you say, these are the requirements, and you cover
Yeah.
all that in the special use.
Or you do it as a special exception, right? That
Right.
you're gonna have those impositions.
So
So
you-
that,
you
that
list
getting
all
back
those.
to where you're gonna have to make sure this code reconciles, because
Yep,
I think that the real issue there is you care about, well, you really only care about the setback, except if your house is next door and you didn't have to worry about someone in a window looking at, next to your window level, and now you do, it's in the setback that you otherwise wouldn't
Plus,
have
if there's a
residential.
garage on the property next to it, or behind it, whatever, now you only have 10 feet between structures. And that's probably not a very good idea from a fire safety standpoint. If you have two dwelling units that are 10 feet apart, as opposed to.
Jim's
Although in
point-
some communities, go to Chicago, right? That happens every.
Share walls.
2.5 feet, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
our-
why-
But I'm with
that's
you,
why
yeah.
Chicago whole blocks burn, you know?
Yeah,
But
our
that's
code- our code-
the whole reason for the fire
Our
code.
code says, principal structure, the word use is in the same spot, so it says accessory structure and accessory use. So what he's saying is, you're now putting a residential use, more of an
Sure.
occupied use,
I'm with
where
you.
your accessory structure is just a shed full, a garage full of stuff. Now you're putting somebody in that's living in it, where in the principal structure or use section of our code, there's setbacks that are much greater than
Mhm.
5 feet. So it would just we'd have to write that in the code as some sort of exception.
Or you leave that as a check and balance, back to his point, is that it would get denied.
Yeah, right.
Unless they got a variance in addition to
Right.
Yeah.
special exception.
Gets muddy.
Hmm?
Yeah.
So, let me throw out this one. What if, I continue to see the desirability, but the extreme difficulty of enforcing family. So, I suggest we don't take Jim's first suggestion, but I suggest consider taking both of Jim's second and third, that the accessory dwelling will be a portion of the primary unit only, restricted to no more than 25, I'll say, take Jim's, maybe it could be a different number, 25% of the remaining space of unit. And then we keep our guidance here that the ordinance should be written so that they can't be rented separately. And then that,
What does that mean, though? Can't be rented separately?
Has to be owner occupied.
I don't understand what that means.
You can't have separate leases on a single-family unit, because then
Right.
it's multifamily.
It has
You
to
mean
be
the owner has to own both?
owner occupied.
Owner has to
owner
live.
occupied,
But the family, we're not talking about families, right? We're talking about two individual families.
Yes,
living
but,
in a-
but an
on the same
owner has to
property.
live there.
yeah,
Or if he does choose to rent it out, he has to rent out the entire
entire
property.
thing.
Okay,
So he could rent it out to somebody who has a grandma,
okay.
right?
Okay.
And then-
Whoever's living in the accessory unit can't be paying rent per se on a
Yes.
lease.
That's another way of illustrating it.
Yeah, that's what I was
Yeah,
trying to say.
consent, can that be gamed? Anything can be gamed, I agree, it can be gamed. But I think that gets close to the spirit and the letter of what we do
Yeah.
without putting a really impossible enforcement.
So then here's my next question coming from my end of things, is we're going to put a tiny home or accessory unit for the in-laws, which they're prone to medical emergencies. We gonna make any access requirements? I gotta be able to get stretchers and, to these people, and personnel, they gotta have access. It's not through a muddy backyard or,
It'd still have to meet the same codes as any other,
So the building permit would look at the design and say you're not up to stuff.
still gonna meet code. So.
there's still gonna have to be a sidewalk that goes to the front door.
If it had a separate entrance, yeah. Yep. Would meet all the rest of the code requirements.
Yeah, that'd be changes to the building code, address access and so forth.
Wait, do we have to have changes to building code?
Those would be the
No.
same. The only problem with the
Yeah.
code is, smaller lots, we have maximum coverage sections in the code. If you're increasing lot coverage, you'd have to get a variance. We don't really have to change it, but if they exceed their lot coverage, they're gonna have to get a variance to add an ADU to the house.
And we don't guarantee that here.
No.
We would
I mean,
not guarantee
We
that.
don't have to
No.
change anything.
They
We
can
do
come and
that.
design that requires a variance,
Oh.
that's fine, yeah.
So then, just as another thing to think about is when if you start to have code sections that require variances, at some point that becomes an issue too, right? Is that you're creating a tax, because really it'd be very tough for people to justify and get those variances based on the legal requirements for a standard development variance, for instance. To say, we need this 75% lot coverage to add this unit. So again, things to think about is you try to reconcile and make all of these yeah, we allow ADUs, but you need an additional variance, and 100% of those, you're never proving your case. But now we know how those work. Sometimes it's if people aren't kicking and screaming, right, then nobody cares, or the neighbors consent, or people show up like the Hillbricks and they kicked and screamed and they didn't meet their requirements anyway. But so that's one of those that even though you allow it, it may be that you need other variances and you never can
Have
make
an
that case.
exception for it.
Yeah.
If you're saying you can't be 25%, more than 25% of the size of your house, that's probably reasonable, unless you have a 750 square foot house.
In which case, you probably shouldn't be thinking about an accessory
Yeah.
dwelling unit in the
So,
house.
I
It's because it's
don't
probably a
know.
tiny
Or
lot.
this-
If we have an exception for the lot coverage, then that won't run into that issue with the variance.
I mean, another way to make them less offensive, if you want to permit them, is to eliminate the possibility of using the accessory structure for one. You have to add on the principal structure.
Right, that was your number 2 point. And that's what I'm suggesting as a way to move forward now, to accept those Jim's second and third points. I'll say it out loud again, I'll repeat it. It would only, the accessory dwelling could only be a portion of the primary unit only, not a separate building.
Right.
And it would be restricted to a size of no greater than 25% of the remaining space.
I don't mind the 25% if you're adding on to the building. I think that makes sense. I think it's a good point. I do want to allow the outside unit, but I can see, I guess, to use offensive. I don't think it is, but I can see how maybe Jim Manded would. Maybe a special exception permit if we wanted to make those, because in some residences, like if you have 6 acres, it's not offensive looking, and we should be allowing them.
And their recourse today, or the recourse if we did this, would be, oh, well, then you want a variance, go to the BZA.
Well, skipping the BZA, who does the special exception permit? Was that Plan Commission? Who does that? Or is that BZA?
BZA.
So if it's not a variance, and I'm trying to word that way on purpose, if it's a special use permit, which is what we used to have, we still have that actually in there, but we never use it. What's the state requirement on a special use permit? Is there a set of
There's a
standards?
standard also
Yeah, I
that
don't know
I
what
think
it
that it's
is.
gonna be tough for, and I'll send it to you, but
So,
I think a lot of those are still tough for people to meet.
yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out how to avoid. If there's some special permit they need, who reviews that, and how, we would have to have some sort of standards for that
And so
Yeah,
that's,
doesn't
the
require
same
variance.
Not the same list as a regular variance.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, even if it's not, I don't wanna do this, if it's something that's part of the permit, and it has to get reviewed by, and I'm just making up names, me and Jay, or somebody, I don't know how that would work either, but is there a board that has to review that, or who's gonna review that? I don't know,
Well, if
I'm capable of reviewing it, if we had a set of standards, and you said, I wanna put it in my garage, what would that be?
It would be your BZA.
That's what I'm
And to me, that it should be the BZA,
Yeah,
and you don't want to make these easy. You want to make sure, in my opinion, you want to make sure people are complying,
yeah.
so that they do
So if we
everything.
have
They
standards,
go,
and you say you have to get a special use
Yeah.
permit or something.
It would be the same kind of petition and
Right.
asking and going through and having your hearing to make sure that you comply.
Can we create, I shouldn't say it though, can we create something with our rules, or does it have to be state mandated? Depending on how
Well,
we
that's
word
the
it?
start with the state, so you can
Yeah.
always make.
Yeah.
the-
Let's
yeah,
start
so
with the state one and look at that.
Yeah.
I also, for the outside units, doesn't just the lot size and the setbacks prevent people from putting in like?
It will in
Porter
some
Cove?
cases,
Because
yeah.
But isn't that a good thing, that it restricts
Shouldn't have it if they don't have the room. Yeah.
additional structure to
Yeah.
the property?
Yeah, but I don't I'm happy to meet you guys in the middle and say, okay, we don't put this for everybody. But I even think if we did put the outside unit for everybody, I think those smaller units, or those smaller
Smaller
lot
lots,
size
yeah.
are already restricted anyway.
They are restricted.
And that's where I was
So
getting
that's
at.
why-
Some of it might be self-policed where it's
Yeah.
impossible for anybody to have them.
So I'm just trying to like think of, but, you know, I'm sure that they're figure out a way to do it. I mean, I don't know if they can. So
Or they'd ask for additional variances that would allow that in conjunction with.
Which they can always ask for variance, yeah.
But anyway, that was my only thing. I do think they're appropriate in a lot of cases. I think that they look fine, and I think it meets, but yeah. But the third point, I like, it's fine.
The limit on the size.
Was that the third point? I thought was the rental, renting.
Oh, 3B over
The
there.
3B, yeah.
Yeah,
And the limit on the size I also like.
yeah,
I like the ability to have that separate building created, as long as you have a standard for the footprint, you know, the size of property you have to work with. As long as it can accommodate it, great, if it doesn't, then you can't.
yeah. If we said we are relaxing none of our coverage, none of our setbacks, then A, small lots downtown couldn't put it anywhere other than,
Probably not.
if they're a single story, they could go second story, and that's about all. B, if they wanted to convert a garage, they would be caught at the permit because they're saying, your garage is 5 feet away from the boundary line. You can't do that. You can do something else, right? If you have acreage, sky's the limit, go to, do whatever you want, right?
Sure.
But you have to obey all of the coverages.
Yeah, you don't want a duplex, you don't want to permit the units to be of equal size. You want to still have the restriction on size.
Right,
Yeah.
right. If he wants to build another house, he's got a subdivided property. That's the way it goes.
Right.
And I like that size restriction, the 25%, I think makes perfect sense. I do like the idea, though, of being able to rent to someone that's not necessarily family, because otherwise you're restricting a lot of people's economic ability to maybe afford that property or like in retirement, the examples I had given earlier. And I don't know where sharing DNA makes that big of a difference as far as density and everything else, but if grandma's in there, or if it's a stranger, as long as they aren't violating any of our laws, rules, ordinances, nuisance stuff. I don't know. That's my thought.
I agree. I do think that as long as there's an owner, I don't want a bunch of investors
Well,
coming in.
no,
and
you
like
have to,
saying,
have to be
The
an
owner
owner.
part
You
is
have,
important.
owner has to be in the primary building, yeah. That's my thought.
I like it.
You want to see if we can rewrite it and then get it out to everybody before the next meeting?
Rewrite
The-
the end section of it?
Yeah.
Okay, but let's see if we can get consensus converging here, right? So it is. We're going to emphasize that we, the ability to build it must not violate any of the existing development standards.
Right.
In particular setbacks, in particular lot coverage. It must be restricted to 25% or less of the remaining, which adding the existing, unless they fit into it. And then I think we're saying we're leaving the recommendation for occupancy as is. That is, ADUs may not be rented separately from the main dwelling unit, but may be made available to a renter who leases the entire property, which I don't think is what Jim Burge wants.
Yeah, that.
I think
that-
Jim
that
Burge
part,
wants
yeah.
to be able to rent the mother-in-law suite to anybody he wants to.
Wait, isn't that what it says in here? I read it 3 times.
We recommend 3B as it best supports the goals for authorizing and encouraging ADUs, i.e. ADUs may not be rented separately from the main dwelling unit, but may be made available to a renter who leases the entire property.
Oh,
That says you can't rent it.
How about the restriction against using an accessory building, requiring the unit to be added on to the primary structure? Is that something that's,
Well,
Possible.
where I ended up was responding to Tara's point about, on small lots, don't worry about accessory dwelling unit. Adhering to the development standards means it'll never happen. But allowing it to happen on a very large property is acceptable. So
okay,
right now, where I'm at is, we don't have to require it that it be the main
okay,
building.
'cause it's gonna basically be imposed on its own,
Well,
By the
it will be,
size of the
it'll be,
property.
exactly.
okay.
I think we're doing a disservice to our residents by changing the definition of what an R1 is.
Well, there's no question we're changing to what R1 is if we
We are
accept it.
redefining your R1.
Yeah.
If we are going to allow it to be rented to multiple families, you know, if I own my house and I put an accessory building there and I'm allowing the college kid that I don't know to rent it, I no longer live in an R1. And we have zoning for a reason.
oh, the separate unit, you're talking about the separate unit.
Which could be a family, may not be just a college student. I mean, we're not defining who can rent, it could be the single mom with 2 kids. We are changing it, the definition of what an R1 is, if we start allowing accessory structures on the property and other families moving in.
I agree, we are changing what R1 is.
It's like, but it's not R2, it's like R1 and a half. I don't know. Like, it's not completely different.
But the issue,
Multiple families living on one piece of property.
Yeah.
the issue is what you do to those who already invest here. And again, it gets back to what the community is, what you want it to
Yeah.
be, and what people came here as, right? That's,
To that point, having done this for 6 years, I did have a neighbor complain, because he had lived here well, since the 80s, you know, so he had been here for a long time. And I told him what Jim always tells me, you know, if you move next to a farmland and it becomes an airport, you have the right to complain about the airport because you move next to farmland. But if you move next to the airport, why are you complaining about the airport? You move next to the airport. They moved to a tourist, like, you live in a tourist community. It has always been a tourist community. And now you're mad that tourists are here and there's
Yeah.
hikers in your area. I don't know. It's always been a state park, like even when you guys moved in here. So
but I
that
did-
was his complaint, that there were people hiking.
Yeah, but
You're right.
I didn't buy a house in my subdivision for tourists to start staying weekends in my subdivision.
Right.
Well,
I
that's a
don't
big
know.
problem. The state government has done that to you. They can do that.
Well,
to
there
them.
is
And
that,
has
but
nothing-
we're talking about,
This has nothing to do.
we're talking about 2 residents of.
That's what we're talking
That, and that's where I'm coming from. I mean, R1 is R1. Either we redefine R1 or we're breaking our own zoning rule by allowing
All right,
a
so
second rental property on a R1.
So I kinda wanna find out if we wanna go forward with the ADU at all. But I suggest as a practical matter that we let Jim rewrite it. And Jim, I'll ask if you collaborate with me on it,
Okay,
right?
sure.
So we can pressure test it and get it together. And then, when we get together next time,
Then
we
can vote.
won't be thinking about, well, am I voting for this or that? We'll be voting for a specific implementation of it.
Absolutely.
And for some of us, that may be, I already know I don't wanna vote for it, and that's cool. That's perfectly cool. But to be fair to everybody, let's make sure in black and white what it is, right?
Can we separate that one from this other one?
Could we vote on that separately? What do you mean?
So, like I said, I don't wanna destroy everything we've done up to this point.
Oh, no, you mean, could we vote like the ADU separately?
Yes.
That is
Can
exactly
we
what I'm
have,
talking about.
yeah, can we
Because
have separate,
Nobody's had any comments about the rental stuff except for a few detailed corrections that were there. I understand that.
and even moving forward, right, it's gonna go before you when you start through the formal process. The council's gonna have final say.
And there's the code, which is gonna be slightly different than this anyway.
Well, for every
It may
issue,
be
what
that
I'm
the council
suggesting
doesn't
is we take,
want this.
you know, we take at least 2 or 3 different choices. We say, look, for this issue, what's the consensus, 1, 2, or 3? And then we write the code that way. And the next issue, you know,
Right.
because I don't wanna necessarily just write the code the way I think it should be, you know, it's a recommendation. But I wanna identify all the choices that are out there, and,
Well, I want to identify a small number of choices.
yeah, right.
I think we beat a lot of the choices to death. Good for us. That's why we spend all the time on it. But in this substantive area right here, let's narrow it down to 1, 2, or 3.
Which, can you repeat 1, 2, or 3? It's that they must.
Will we or will we not allow a second building?
Talk about that afterwards.
That, I think, is the most important one.
Yeah.
Will we or will we not put any, I think the consensus is we're not gonna impose on the staff of the town trying to figure out if it's family or not. I don't know, do you wanna see that? Do you wanna try that?
No,
I think we've talked that one to death. Yeah.
I think take it out.
And then the third one was if
The
it's rented.
percentage of, a limit on the size of the second unit.
Right.
That's really 2 issues, really 2 issues.
What about the renting of the unit? Like, is that,
Well, I think just get that into, I mean, it's written right here in one way. Jim can take a look at it and see if we can write it a different
If the
way.
point is to have a relative, you know, stay, then why would you wanna allow rentals?
well,
Which
if we're
is
not
what-
having relatives stay, I think that was the consensus, right?
Right.
So we would want rentals, so that's what I'm saying, that changes that.
Well, I think you need to figure out what the consensus is, right? Cause this is split, like I think,
I don't think it's a split.
I think it
well,
is.
you would
I
like to have non-family be able to live there and rent it, right?
Yeah.
I don't know that everybody, I don't think Chief would say that he,
Yeah, could we ask?
so that's what I'm saying, you guys,
I think we need to honor the R1 zoning.
Well, then do you wanna, I'm happy to have, I don't know, I don't wanna call it R 1.5, but that's what I'm good with.
I didn't move into an R1.5, I moved into an R1.
I would like to see this all written out and let us take it back and like digest it and come back for a final, like, boom. Because there's,
I'm gonna have to choose one way or the other.
right,
Yeah, I'm happy, I think I'm along with the lines of what Jim,
Okay, I got an
But I
idea.
built an
Pretend
accessory
you're a
structure.
jury and you're taking your first vote.
Alright, that's.
What do you
what's the
want
straw poll?
rental to, and stick your hands in here. I mean, everybody stick your hand in. You want rentals to anybody or just family? Which one do you want?
I want 3B, just the way it says.
Okay? What's
ADUs may
everybody
not be
want?
rented separately from the
Before we
neighborhood.
leave, what's everybody thinking right now, and you can change your mind later? I mean, just.
give me the
I
question
wanna
again?
s-
So do you want to only
Family only
be,
or
family
rental?
only?
Rental.
Yeah, show of hands for family only.
Well, hold on, before we go to that side, are we talking accessory buildings or main,
That part.
That's
ADUs.
That's a yes or no.
or
really, the
a
question is,
separate
do you want
building or an
ADUs?
existing building?
That should be
Right,
the
the
first
first question is, do you want ADUs?
Can I suggest that I go through and get each choice identified? And
No,
at the
but
next meeting, we.
Before you go, before that even, why move forward? What if 4 people on this commission don't want ADUs right now, and they know that? What's the point of spending all the time and effort?
True, true.
Fair. I want ADUs.
That's the first vote.
ADUs.
80s.
So that's 3 people
Is that it?
out of 4.
out of 7.
So- I'm very, very torn on it. I don't want it outside of immediate family. But I know we don't have a way to,
Well, that's the next question. If it's only ADUs and it has to be owner occupied and family, what's the consensus?
I like owner occupied.
Owner occupied and family, well, they would all be owner occupied. So owner occupied but family only, no rental outside. So,
I think Jim does have to
And you
leave.
can enforce that the way you enforce anything else. Somebody calls and complains, you go check.
well,
it out.
here's,
That's right. That's right.
I'm gonna rephrase what I said. I'm gonna go with against it because the problem isn't now, when I build it for my in-laws. The problem is the person that buys the house from me and what they do with it after I leave. So it's not just a problem what we immediately do, it's the problem in the
You
future.
have to find
So-
somebody with an elderly relative.
Right, and there, with the day and age of Airbnb, that would be the first thing I looked at when I bought that property is that's an Airbnb.
Yeah.
So I am gonna go with,
Because you're probably factoring that into your.
to my
Can
purchasing.
you afford it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I am gonna go with, I'm not for
So then-
separate buildings.
But here's one, as you guys consider this, one thought of why it still makes sense to, you're gonna go forward, because even if you have what that would result in is if you have an ordinance, that would mean you would end up with an unfavorable recommendation, but it's still a recommendation to the council, and the council will still consider this. So there's still a reason to move forward. The whole point of this is the consensus as to what that language.
I agree, and there's another reason to move forward with it also, because the issue is out there. The issue is gonna come before the BZA, right? So if we can establish an acceptable set of guidelines that we think is helpful,
But
we're
if-
doing the town a good
But if
favor.
your
So let's,
commission
I suggest, let's
votes,
Jim write up some way of parsing this into decidable, comparable and decidable items. And let's take a look at it next month.
but if
What I
your
can do on
commission,
Every issue, I can delineate the different choices.
Right.
but if your commission votes that you don't want to advance that, then that's different, right? So that
Right.
if you don't have an ordinance and the majority votes that this is a dead issue, then it's a dead issue.
At that
That's
point.
different than giving a favorable recommendation and actually going through the
But
process.
let's look at it with fresh eyes, in black and white, with these three issues.
I think you were right, it was split.
With these three issues
It is,
delineated by Jim, separate building or not, limit on the size, and the rentability of it, rentability / occupancy of it. And remember, we can remove the whole thing, and we're still gonna move forward with the rental ordinance.
Yeah, the rental is great.
All right, all good?
Love the rental.
Thank you all for this. We're gonna adjourn, but I'll sit and talk to you.
Does this mean that you're going to, have a more discussion at another meeting?
Oh,
Yes.
we never do anything without discussion. Okay, I'll take a motion to adjourn.